Dominic, in the last year, much to our dismay and concern, you experienced a major life challenge, which was a surprise to us and a burden to many. What actually happened? How did it transpire?
So last May, just almost a year ago, I was shaving and thought, oh, that's odd because this bit sticks out and this bit goes in. So a bit of a lump there. And being a bloke, I thought nothing of it and said nothing. And then 2 days later, when we were having breakfast, my wife and I, who is a nurse, I said, oh, have a look at this. And she took one look at it and said, you're going to the doctor now. And so obediently I did. And so by 9:30 that morning, I was in the doctor's surgery and GP looked at it and said, I'm worried about that. So when your GP says, I'm worried, you kind of wake up. So she took some bloods and it transpired very soon after that, just a couple of days after that, it was a cancer. But we thought it would be a lymphoma. And so I was booked in to the hospital, they did tests, and it turned out that this was a metastasis from a kidney cancer. And I'd been totally asymptomatic, no symptoms whatsoever. I was probably fitter at that point in my life than I'd been for years. And it was a huge, huge blow because we realized, and the surgeon, the urology surgeon, made it very clear that because it was showing up in the neck, it was already out of the kidney and throughout my body. So it was very advanced. And I'd probably been developing this kidney tumor for about 2 years. And so that was a huge, huge blow and utterly unexpected. So I then went through the removal of the kidney and once recovered from the operation, started on the therapy and have been on therapy now since last October. And it has been a massive, massive thing for us all as a family to adjust to. It was completely out of the blue. And in one sense, because Marjorie's a nurse practitioner, we know a lot. So we were immediately under no illusions and were able to ask the surgeon and the oncologist lots of questions. So we got lots of information and they were able to paint a very clear picture for us. And the picture was not good at all.
Now, if you go back to January this year, you were concerned that you would arrive in April when you had a wedding.
Yes, our middle daughter was getting married in April. So I was all lined up, not just to be there, but to take the service. And back in January, I had a scan. And up until that point, there had been a couple of tiny dots on my left lung. Most of the secondaries and mets were in my lymph system. And the results of the scan, after 3 months of the first layer of therapy, were that the lymph systems were held stable, which is good, the lymph tumours, but there had been huge growth in my lungs and they were basically just filling up with tumours. And seeing it on the screen, it was just this mass of white tumours. And we'd known that I was having breathing problems. My breathing was tightening and I was coughing and becoming breathless. And this was why. So out of the blue, we were thrown into a much more serious situation. And the prognosis back in January was quite bleak. There was serious doubt over whether I'd make it to April to the wedding. And we spoke very openly with the oncology team, who have been brilliant. And they said, well, you might get one summer, this summer, and you might be okay for the wedding, but have a contingency plan.
Now, in all of this, Dominic, Did you ever get disappointed with God or angry with God?
Disappointed, angry, frustrated, bewildered. Yes, we we had some very robust conversations with God, and I mean we knew and still know deep down that we're never going to tell him anything that he doesn't know already, and we're never going to tell him anything or reveal anything about ourselves which he hasn't known all along. So we know that we're not surprising him. So he's not sort of sitting there thinking, oh, if I'd known you were like that, I wouldn't have bothered loving you. We've never had that kind of worry. But our praying has become a lot less religious and a lot more real. And much, much more from the heart. And much less about what we ought to be saying to God, because that's what other people would approve, and much more about just what we have to say. I think also we found ourselves much more sensitive to other people's trials and difficulties. So when we hear of other people, then our hearts are more stirred. So we pray for them more feelingly and more frequently than ever we would have done before. So it's opened up our walk with God and our fellowship with God.
Now, what has been the comfort or the cork that's kept the net afloat, as it were? What's kept you going throughout this? And the prospects for all of us are to come to the end of this life. You're not the only person who's going to die. It is appointed unto all men once to die. But your heightened consciousness of it, what's your comfort in that?
It's been on two levels. I think the first, and I'd have to kind of acknowledge it, is that the second level of treatment that I'm on, the immunotherapy, is working. It's not curing it. It's not getting rid of the tumours, but the win for me is keeping them stable. It's neither growing nor shrinking, and no new ones developing elsewhere in the body. That has been great, because that has made a huge difference to my breathing and what I can do, my energy levels, and that's been a great gift from God. And I see that as being from God, that people have discovered and invented drugs that can do that. But in the heart and in the minds and within the family, there's been this whole envelope of comfort around whatever else is happening medically, and that's to do with who God is and what He's like, and so I think there have been sort of four elements for it. If I try and tease it out and examine my own thinking on it all and feeling, I can identify four things. The first is knowing that we are loved, whatever, we're loved already, and we don't have to maintain God's love for us. His love for us is something which does not come from how we are doing. It's coming from Him. It originates in Him. And knowing that love is, it doesn't mean we always feel great, and we don't always feel loved, but we know that we are. So it's not like if you imagine a strip of elastic held in place at one end by a thumbtack, and you can stretch it wherever, but it's always going to go back to where it's held, and that's what it's like. The second part of it is knowing that we're understood by God, because we can't even voice ourselves most of what we feel, and there are parts of ourselves which we don't understand. I mean, that's true for us all. There are parts of the way of what goes on in our minds and our hearts that we have very little access to. It just comes out. So we don't really understand ourselves brilliantly, but to know that we are understood completely by somebody who loves us, who understands us with the most generous heart, that's a wonderful thing. Even when you can't make yourself understood and you don't know what's going on inside your own head or body, Like for 2 years, I didn't know this was going on inside my own body. You know, you think you would. The third thing, so loved, being understood by the one who loves us completely. The third thing is, if I can put it like this, is knowing that we are held. That underneath us, God has us in his hands. And sometimes there are some days and moments where I feel just almost like a little child. You know, any pretense at adulthood that's got life together and is in control, you know, it's a load of baloney. And I'm just like this little child, curled up but held. And that has been a deeply sustaining experience and comforting. And that's for the whole family as well. And so I have to look ahead to a time when I'm not here. And like you were saying, we're all dying. It's just that this is going to happen a bit more quickly than we'd anticipated, unless the Lord works to delay that. So I know there's a time I'm not going to be here. I know that the Lord has my family in his hands. And in actual fact, he always has. So that's a wonderful comfort to me as well. The fourth thing, so being loved, being understood, being held, the fourth thing is that I know that whatever happens and however I'm feeling and whatever's going on physically, I'm still going to a place that is infinitely better. And this life was never meant to be the best one. And that heaven is there and waiting, and being with Christ is there. You know, it's like Paul says in Philippians, I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far. And if in the process of living and dying, Christ can be exalted in this body, even by going wrong, yeah, big time, then that is a wonderful and amazing, that's an awesome thing to think that Christ, who is enthroned in glory, can still be exalted with this little body, then in life or in death. That's an awesome thing. So to know that I'm going to a place that is infinitely better is a win. You know, I've had to face all that and think it's coming, and it is a win to me.
And wasn't this something that our Saviour knew something?
Yeah.
Who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. Now, I'm going to ask you, there'll be one or two or maybe more people who pick this up and watch it. And is there a couple of verses from the Bible that you would like to share with them and with us that might help somebody who's facing this great life challenge?
That verse that I just mentioned from Philippians, about Christ being exalted in my body, whether by life or by death, that's been a huge help to me, because it's been one way of making sense of what's happening, of seeing that it is not just loss. So one of the things we've had to learn is that what we used to do a lot of, and I think actually there's a lot in life and in the way we do evangelical Christianity, which pushes us in this direction. We explain things, we give an account of things, we make sense of everything. And in one way, that actually is a huge pressure when you're in ministry, because everybody wants you to make sense of everything, make sense of the passage, make sense of my life, make sense of the world around us and why it is, and you're always making sense of it and explaining it and all the rest of it. And then all of a sudden you realise that you can't make sense of your own life. you can't make sense of what's happening, you know, so we've had to learn, God has just stripped away from us, we've had to learn not to trust our own sense making, because we can't make any sense of it in normal terms. And lots of our friends have struggled with that, you know, they've struggled with that this is happening to us, and been angry with God on our behalf, and felt really hurt and bewildered, and just, so we've had to learn that God has a reason, and the reason is can't just be pinned down to some particular situation or circumstance, but in general terms and deep terms, Christ is exalted in this. And the funny thing is, you don't have to be a kind of black belt, third dan, supercharged Christian for that to be meaningful, because it's just right in the core of every Christian's heart. You know, when Christ is exalted, something just comes alive within us, and because the Spirit is within, and the Spirit resonates something deep within us when, through our little lives, the King of the universe is exalted. And I've found that to be energizing and sustaining, and has given me a sense of purpose. Yeah, in this. Yeah. So I would go straight to that one. But also the verse that tells us that underneath you are the everlasting arms. Yeah. If they're underneath me, it doesn't matter how far down I go, they're underneath me.
You can't get below underneath.
No, he never has to. I'm never going to be out of his reach, because his arms are already in. So, I mean, we do sink. I have some days that are really sinking. There are days when I feel really, really low and would love to die. I don't feel suicidal, but I feel, Lord, just take me now. Just sort all this. Just take me now. When I first started on the first layer of drugs, the TKIs, one of the side effects of most of these drugs is nausea. So this was in October in Aberdeen. It was a dreich, miserable day. I was driving into town and suddenly this wave of nausea hit me. So I pulled over into a park and ride car park, which had no cars in it whatsoever. And I've got to get into town for an appointment, but I am kneeling, not praying, I'm kneeling over a storm grate in this abandoned park and ride car park, just bringing everything up. And there are tears streaming down my face, and it's sore. And I'm praying, this is back in October, I'm praying, Lord, if it's going to be like this, just take me now. All I can see is this grate. And there are days like that. There are days when I feel despair at whether it's providing for family or whether it's making good use of the time, or whether it's just all my own ordinary weaknesses and fallibilities compounded with this. And I think, this is wretched. And sometimes I do sink. But however low I sink, and here's the thing, whether I feel it or not, those arms are still underneath me. And God does lift us up.
Being a Yorkshire man, you will appreciate the Yorkshire farmer's prayer. And I believe that has been your prayer, and may it continue to be. The Yorkshire farmer's prayer is, Lord, keep me kept.
Yeah.
And that's what you found.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for being with us in these moments.
Thank you.
And we wish you increased knowledge of the grace of God meeting you at every point.
Thank you.